Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We are now in Song of the Open Road, passage number 7. Now my hope is that you have your own copy, as I've said a number of times in these lectures, you have your own copy of Leaves of Grass, and you've been annotating with us and following along at learnstrong.net. Down the left-hand side, we've called this series of lectures Talks with Walt. And I'm hoping that you've been following us from the very beginning, the introductory comments, the inscriptions, poems, all the way, obviously, every line of Song of Myself, all the way up and including the Song of the Open Road, passage 6. Now, that's the section that we just finished with. Some have qualified it as the heart of Song of the Open Road. Some have qualified passage 6 as the heart of all of Leaves of Grass. There's a huge debate, obviously, about that. We did comment on the fact that we seem to be moving from the Psalms to the Proverbs, and we now are going to be messing around in passage 7 with Whitman and Socrates, or Plato. We're going to see a lot of questions that are going to look a lot like the way Socrates, the game Socrates used to play. And obviously we've given a number of lectures at learnstrong.net on Plato and the Socratic approach, Meutica as it's sometimes referred to. Now, just pointing out, as you've got your copy in front of you, scan really quickly passage 7 of Song of the Open Road and just count up the number of question marks that are there. You got 10 question marks in this little short poem, this little section. So we're going to, want to pay attention to that. These are powerful questions, especially as they relate to issues of existence. So let's take a look now. We'll read the poem, then we'll come back to exegete. This is the way he says it, passage 7, Song of the Open Road. Here is the influx of the soul. The efflux of the soul comes from within through embowered gates, ever-provoking questions. These yearnings, why are they? These thoughts in the darkness, why are they? Why are there men and women that while they are nigh me, the sunlight expands my blood? Why, when they leave me, do my penance of joy sink flat and lank? Why are there trees I never walk under, but large and melodious thoughts descend upon me? I think they hang there winter and summer on those trees and always drop fruit as I pass. What is it I interchange so suddenly with strangers? What with some driver as I ride on the seat by his side? What with some fisherman drawing a scene by the shore as I walk by and pause? What gives me to be free to a woman's and man's goodwill? What gives them to be free to mine? Now, the fact that the word free gets used 2 times in the final part of this passage 7 will be significant. We have to talk about it. Notice we'll begin with this immediacy. Notice that we will have here used several times in passage 6 at the end. We will have here as the first line. We will have here used in passage 8. What's going on? Immediacy. This goal for Whitman to imagine that the journey on the open road, afoot and lighthearted I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me leading wherever I choose, the opening lines of Song of the Open Road. We're going to start with immediacy, right here, right now. In other words, you needn't worry about trying to figure out what you're going to do in the future in regards to this traveling of the open road. Now is the time. Here is the efflux of the soul. You'll remember this word efflux from Song of Myself, passage 22, partaker of influx and efflux. That is to say, always it's about evolution. Always it's about growing. It's always about expanding. It's always about providing something for. And then, of course, the soul is used here, which immediately sets us up for our study, obviously, of Plato. We immediately think of Phaedo, don't we? And the argument for the existence of the soul that Socrates will give beautifully with that cup of hemlock sitting right there on the table, right before he's to drink it, to die. And his students want to hear from him about what? Why he's so happy. Why is he so happy? I'm about to take a journey. Dude, you're about to drink poison. Yeah, that's what I just said. I'm about to take a journey. Because there's this thing called the soul that will transcend the body. And that journey is a fascinating idea. And I'm willing to discuss with you guys what I mean when I use the term soul. The Phaedo, of course, one of those classic texts. The second time the word efflux gets used in this poem, in this section. The efflux of the soul comes from within, right? This idea of efflux, of course, is flowing out. So notice the irony of talking from within. Through embowered gates, we're going to see this word embowered again with Sleepers, passage 7. It's the only other time Whitman uses this word, gates. Ever-provoking questions. And there it is. Let's put it in our notes. The idea is simple. In many ways, you could define it this way. You know how we say, we are the stories we tell, we're the stories we retell, we're the stories we decide to accept, we're also the stories we decide to reject. But think of it from this perspective. We're the questions that we ask. What questions do we ask? And as we get older, and as we become more conversant with ideas, we want to ask some, notice here, provoking questions. These yearnings, longings, right? Now, this word yearnings in Song of Expositions, passage 4, well, we're going to see it again, yearnings, the same. These yearnings, why are they? Why is it that all of a sudden you want to know something that before you could care less about? Isn't that fascinating? I have students that will say, you know, as I got older in high school, I found that I began to want to know things that, quite frankly, I just didn't care about before when I was a freshman. When I was a freshman, these were the things I was interested in. And then as I get older, I'm like, I wonder about, why is that? These yearnings, these longings, why are they? These thoughts in the darkness, why are they? Now, of course, the thoughts in the darkness can be obviously literal and metaphysical. We think of Pascal, the great French philosopher, who will talk about the thoughts, the longings, the needs to answer the ultimate questions, right? How did we get here? Why are we here? Where are we going? These kind of thought-provoking questions, often, have you noticed this? They happen in the darkness. When, for example, you're lying there trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, think, to use the representation from Pooh's Corner, when Pooh begins to think, right? The questions, the provoking questions that matter most in our lives, sometimes they do happen in the darkness. Obviously, the darkness can be metaphoric as well. When I'm in the middle of some really rough stuff, it's funny how I'll start asking questions about life and why I am the way that I am. Why are there men and women that while they are nigh me, this notion of proximity, we've seen this before in Leaves of Grass, while they are nigh me, the sunlight expands my blood. Think about the positive role models in your life. Boy, it's such a beautiful question to ask. I am a part of all that I have met, is the way Tennyson says it in Ulysses. Think about the people who, when you're close to them, the blood is expanded as a metaphor for what for you? Excitement, enthusiasm, energy, the idea that, I just somehow feel like I'm called to be something better. Often coaches can be this for athletes. Often teachers can be this for students. Obviously parents and relatives can be this. If you have a grandparent or a great-grandparent that calls you to somehow be better. What a provocative idea. And he asked the question almost rhetorically, why is it that there's certain people I want to be around. I want to go back to them. And then obviously the second follow-up question is, who are you that for? Are you already that kind of person for someone younger than you? If you're an older brother or sister, are you in fact living a life that's attractive to them? That when they're around you, their blood is expanded. Notice the use here as well of sunlight. It's a beautiful one, right? The idea of sunlight can be joy. Why is it that I'm around certain people that just make me feel so amazing? And when I walk away from them, I'm like, oh, I am so glad I got to spend just a few moments with them. Obviously, we love to be around those kinds of people, but the inverse question is, are you that kind of person for anybody? Do you serve that kind of role for anybody? Why these same people, when they leave me, do my penance of joy sink flat and lank? By the way, we're going to see this penance in our study of Brooklyn Ferry, passage 3, here in a little bit when we get onto that one. Why is it that I become sad when I'm not with certain people? Who are the people right now in your life? Notice we're asking a lot of the 3B questions, because this obviously is a poem that leans itself to it because of all the questions. Who are the 3 people you would love to sit down with right now, either together or one at a time? Obviously, we're asking a question that Dante loved to ask as he was putting together his Divine Comedy, right? Who are the people you'd love to sit down with and just be in their presence, to let the sunlight come? And when finally you had to leave them, you might be a little bit flat, a little bit lank, like, kind of, almost like sad. Who are those people in your life? And again, can you be that for somebody else? That is to say, you can provide that kind of energy. And then Ruthie's tree. Now, we've made lots of references to Ruthie's tree over the years. It's planted out there for a reason. And it's all in really tribute to this line. Some of my students, this is their favorite line in all of Leaves of Grass, because they love trees, right? They not only love trees because, hello, you can't breathe without trees. They love trees because of what they symbolize, what they represent. Look at this line. He asks it this way: why are there trees I never walk under, but large and melodious thoughts descend upon me? Of course, we'll think about the importance of trees in Live Oak in Louisiana, a poem of Leaves of Grass. The question is a profound one. Trees can be so symbolic of hope, of joy, of prosperity, in the real sense of that word. Think about what Wordsworth says in Tintern Abbey. He says that as he's gotten older, he began to accept and understand the power of lofty thoughts. He calls them elevated thoughts. The notion that when you are around certain trees, then there is a certain kind of, go back to it, large and melodious thoughts. Now, obviously, we can think about our favorite tree, and I certainly recommend at 3B that you write that down, but think about the symbolism of tree and the way in which certain people are amazing trees. And what do we know about great trees? Well, there's 3 to 1 more below the earth than there is above the earth, or the tree would blow over in the middle of the wind. In other words, great trees have great roots. The people who you want to be with the most are the people who have deep roots. Those roots can't be torn up so easy. They're deep, and you respect that about them. And obviously, we want to challenge ourselves to grow these kinds of deep roots from the efflux, to begin this section, right, that word. And then notice in parenthetics, making us think again of the number of times in Leaves of Grass where he's played this game. He says, I think these melodious thoughts, I think they hang there winter and summer on those trees and always drop fruit as I pass. Can we say this? This is what all great poets, all great artists do, right? They will give us the thing that we so desperately want. And yet somehow, can we say it out loud? It was always there. Go back to your study of Plato. The ideas of the cave allegory resonate so powerfully because they seem so unbelievably simple, obvious, true. Well, of course I know that's true. And yet I have to be reminded, and that's what great artists do, in the same way that great trees remind us, there's so much more of a great tree under the ground than there is above the ground, which is so compelling as a word picture for us. Then we finish with 5 whats. What is it I interchange so suddenly with strangers? We're back, of course, to the last lines of passage 6, to be loved by strangers, right? What with some driver? Now, Whitman loved to do this. He would get up on those large coaches, and he would sit with drivers and ride through the streets of Brooklyn and New York. And he loved being up there, and he loved looking at the skills of those drivers, because it's an amazing thing. When you meet somebody that has those incredible skills, I don't know if you've ever been around somebody that drives 18-wheelers and can back them into small areas. It's an amazing skill set. It takes so much discipline to be able to do it well. Whitman was enamored of people who worked with real skills. Do you know what we're saying here? Real skill sets. And one of those were these drivers, and but what he really loved to do was to sit and talk with them, because they were people who lived remarkably different lives in so many ways from himself. He says, why is it that when I'm with these drivers that I love to sit by their side and talk with them? What with some fishermen, right, drawing the net of the scene by the shore as I walk by and pause. In other words, Whitman loved to watch people work. Go back to our reading of I Hear America Singing the Varied Carols I Hear, and then he lists all those different kinds of work. To what degree are you a lover of work? And you enjoy watching it. You enjoy seeing it performed well. The ability to enjoy the performance of a good job is something that Whitman will challenge you to consider as being provocative as well. Finally, he asks, what gives me to be free to a woman's and a man's goodwill? What gives them to be free to mine? In other words, the foundational question of our big 5. If the first is epistemology and what you can know, the second is ontology and who you are. You'll remember, followed by psychology and sociology, and this is the sociological question. Why is it that we can all get along? Because we begin to recognize that there's efflux in all of us. There is that genuine energy within all of us that can be exchanged in provocative and in powerful ways. Let's finish now at 2A. Well, obviously, one of the major points of this poem is we really are the questions that we learn, I would underline that word, that we learn to ask. We got to learn how to ask the right questions. When we're young, we're often too stupid. Can I say that without insult to you? We're often too stupid to be able to ask the right questions. As we get older, we start to think, that's a very interesting question. And to what degree does that question move me? Like I think I said to you before, a student recently telling me all the things he didn't like about this world, this country, this community, the things he no longer believes in. And I listened to him and I said, great, now you know what you don't believe in. Name for me what you do believe in and be concrete. I want to know what you actually believe in. And then when you tell me that you believe in these things, I'm going to ask you, now how do you make them real in your life? How do you live them? The student struggled. Well, I guess I really haven't thought about what I actually believe in. I'm just very confident what I don't believe in. Great. So now that you know what you don't believe in, what do you believe in? That challenge to ask the right questions, obviously central, right? And of course, the source of inspiration is so mysterious. It's so wonderful. Where does your curiosity come from? And why is it that a 5-year-old can go to the park and look at a dandelion for an hour and just be blown away by dandelions? Well, children have this innate curiosity that somehow or another, can we say this out loud tragically, back to passage 6, somehow or another schools for most of us killed. Just killed the curiosity. We actually go into a biology class and say out loud that it bores us. How can life and the study of life bore us? Well, we've kind of come to this point where we're just like, man, I just don't even want to ask the questions anymore. So I challenge you to think this way. About any kind of system in science you're studying, ask the simple question, what would happen if it didn't work? Photosynthesis, boring. Really, what would happen if it didn't work? Ooh, now that is an interesting question. What would happen if we didn't have trees on this planet? Ooh, that's the challenge, right? And to be, obviously the power of the rhetorical question can't be understated here. At 3A, we've mentioned Plato's dialogues. We've given full lectures on so many of them at LearnStrong.net. Obviously, the Apology and those final days of Socrates as we think about them, from the Euthyphro through Crito, and obviously we mentioned the Phaedo. The Apology is not littered with questions, but with enough to be challenging. And then obviously the Republic as well. Finally, at 3B, just to own this for yourself. What is for you your favorite question or questions? What's the ones you're grappling with right now? And were you grappling with that question 10 years ago, or have you evolved to be able to ask a question that's provocative? And then, of course, finally, what is your favorite tree? Either literally or metaphorically, what is the tree you love to walk under? And you remember it long after the fact. Thank you.